53 BC, the arid plains of Carrhae, Syria. Scorching desert winds swept across the cracked and barren wilderness, searing every inch of the parched earth. Sandstorms raged across the land, blurring all sight and shrouding the creeping shadow of impending death. Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's 3 dominant triumvirs and the wealthiest man in the Republic, led 7 elite legions deep into this desolate wasteland. His soldiers were battle-hardened veterans who had fought alongside Julius Caesar to subdue Gaul and crush barbarian tribes, the unbreakable iron backbone sustaining Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean. Crassus burned with boundless ambition, craving the glory of a victorious Eastern campaign against the Parthian Empire to rival Caesar and Pompey and seize the apex of Roman power. Yet now, the grand legacy he had spent his life pursuing had been shattered to dust beneath the endless hail of Parthian arrows. Parthian horse archers swarmed the plains like phantoms, their mounted shadows darting and drifting with unrivaled speed. A relentless deluge of arrows darkened the sun, blotting out the sky entirely. The testudo formation, Rome's impregnable shield wall of interlocked bucklers and rigid discipline, had long stood unyielding against melee charges and ranged barrages, but now it rotted like worm-eaten timber, its edges splintering, crumbling, and falling apart without cease. Frontline soldiers fell screaming into the yellow sand, their blood soaking the parched soil, only to be scorched dry by the desert heat, leaving nothing but dark, muted stains etched into the earth. Death was no longer a distant wartime fate. It was a blade pressed to every Roman soldier's throat. Despair coiled around the legions like desert thorns, burrowing deep into the marrow of every man. Crassus sat rigid upon his war-horse, his gilded armor caked with sand and dried blood. His gaunt hands tightened fiercely around his engraved sword hilt, his knuckles bleached white with overwhelming force. He stared fixedly at the endless tide of black arrows streaking across the horizon, his eyes filled with bitter regret and helpless confusion. In his grand imperial plans, this eastern expedition was meant to be an unstoppable conquest, with wealth and glory his for the taking. He had never imagined being trapped in a desert death trap, his finest troops pinned down and helpless against an unseen foe. He had believed this storm of fatal arrows to be the final call of death, the end brought by mortal enemies. He never knew that true divine judgment lay far beyond mortal battle and earthly conflict. The earth-shattering roar came not from trembling ground or clashing armies, but from the very firmament being torn open by an unstoppable force. At the critical moment when the Roman legions huddled in defensive formation and the Parthian cavalry prepared to charge, the scorching air above the battlefield suddenly twisted, churned, and folded as if an invisible giant had crumpled the heavens themselves. A deep, eerie blue rift in time and space materialized out of nowhere, its edges shimmering with uncanny radiance, exuding an otherworldly aura alien to this age in mortal realm. In the next instant, a sleek, cold, gray metal warbird burst through the heat haze and the rift, descending upon the ancient battlefield without warning. No horse's neighs, no beating wings, only the ear-splitting howl of its engines cut through the desert silence, shaking heaven and earth to their core. This roar was no work of mortal hands. Violent and brutal, yet steeped in the icy cold and machinery, it drowned out every scream and battle horn on the battlefield. The Roman soldiers were struck dead with terror, none recognizing the metallic apparition before them. In their devout mythic beliefs, only Jupiter, king of the gods, could rend the sky and unleash heavenly thunder. They dropped their shields and spears, fell to their knees in the sand and cowered in terror, murmuring frantic prayers to beg divine mercy and salvation. Fear engulfed the Roman legions, yet to the F-35 pilot flying through the temporal rift, the battlefield lay completely exposed before his eyes. His advanced helmet display scanned the entire battlefield in real time, marking every mobile Parthian cavalry unit with bright red highlights, their every move laid bare. The clustered Roman testudo formation was ringed in blue, every deployment and tactic fully visible. To him, this climactic clash of ancient cold warfare was nothing more than two groups of primitive, defenseless targets on a screen. No feuding, no right or wrong, merely a routine low-altitude flight after an accidental time jump. Chapter 2. Dimensional Suppression. Divine Fire Reaps All Lives. No missile strikes, no precision-guided ordnance were needed. The millennia of technological disparity guaranteed no fair fight, only one-sided annihilation and ruthless slaughter. The pilot nudged his controls, and the F-35 dipped into a steep dive toward the Parthian front lines. Its onboard autocannon roared to life, a deafening metallic thunder composing a death rhythm never before heard in the age of cold steel. Muzzle flashes flickered relentlessly as thousands of depleted uranium rounds poured forth at devastating fire rates, engulfing the entire Parthian formation. Flesh, bone, and leather armor were as fragile as paper against such overwhelming kinetic force. The noble Parthian horsemen, famed and feared across Western Asia for their battle prowess, perished before they could even scream, reduced to broken remains scattered across the desert. The once ferocious Parthian main force was erased in an instant, the sand soaked red with countless corpses. Watching the carnage unfold before his eyes, Crassus froze rigid on his horse, staggering and nearly falling from his mount, utterly dumbfounded. He had fought his whole life and witnessed every horror of war, yet he had never beheld such unnatural terror. No charges, no blade combat, an elite army of tens of thousands wiped from existence by a silver bird in the sky, cut down like wheat by an invisible reaper. His lips trembled uncontrollably, his mind consumed by dread and disbelief as he whispered repeatedly, "This is no work of man, no mortal creation." The brief massacre ended, and the F-35 climbed sharply, soaring above the Roman legions. Before the Romans could recover from their shock, two laser-guided bombs dropped toward the heart of the battlefield. To Crassus and his men, two streaks of light fell from the sky, followed by blazing fireballs brighter than the sun, as if miniature suns had descended upon the mortal world. Shockwaves ravaged the plains, sending sand and rock flying. The Roman soldiers' sturdy shields shattered instantly. Countless men were hurled through the air by the blast, their screams echoing across the wasteland. The already crumbling Roman formation descended into total chaos, all military order lost forever. Chapter 3. Collapse of Order, the Death of All Courage. If the cannon fire and bomb blasts brought physical destruction, the dead silence that followed was cruel spiritual torment and total mental collapse. The F-35 circled 30,000 Roman soldiers at supersonic speed, each low pass unleashing a deafening sonic boom. The thunderous shocks shattered eardrums and broke spirits, obliterating the last shreds of Roman courage and resolve. Rome's centuries-old command system, relying on horns, banners, and centurion leadership, crumbled to nothingness in the face of overwhelming dimensional firepower. Centurions roared themselves hoarse, screaming for their men to hold the line until their throats bled, yet no soldier obeyed. Every eye remained fixed on the silver-winged warbird above, filled only with primal terror and despair. They faced no mortal foe of equal strength, but an unstoppable divine entity that defied all laws of war. No siege tactics, no supply warfare were required. One pass, one burst of fire, and Rome's centuries of tactical advantage vanished in an instant.
What had once been a mortal war became nothing but collective despair and inevitable death. Military discipline vanished, loyalty and glory forgotten. Soldiers abandoned their armor and weapons, fleeing in all directions. Rome's once disciplined and fearsome legions devolved into a panicked mob, their battle spirit broken beyond repair. Chapter 4. Post-war emptiness, the secret buried by history. After a long while, the jet's fuel ran low. The F-35 ceased its circling, turned toward the horizon and vanished from sight, leaving the ravaged plains of Carrhae shrouded in absolute silence. Smoke faded and the heat subsided. Surviving Roman soldiers stumbled out from the wreckage of their broken testudo, their steps unsteady and their faces etched with terror. None dared approach the smoldering bomb craters, which reeked of an otherworldly chemical stench alien to their time, a scent that inspired dread and forbidden awe. Crassus would not die an honorable warrior's death at enemy spear point. Instead, he perished under the weight of soul-crushing fear.
That night, the most powerful and wealthy man in Rome curled inside his tent, trembling uncontrollably, his gaze hollow and empty. He never spoke of the celestial apparition, never acknowledged the divine judgment that had overturned all he knew, unable to bear the utter insignificance of mortal power against unknowable celestial might. No official Roman history would ever record the hidden truth of Carrhae, 53 BC. From the moment the blue rift opened and the silver-winged warbird appeared, the natural course of human civilization had been forcibly rewritten by the power of the future. Rome retreated in haste, abandoning all ambition to conquer and expand eastward. Not out of fear of Parthian arrows or cavalry, but because every survivor carried an unshakable truth. Some divine power existed that no mortal could ever defy or resist. They buried the terrifying memory deep in the desert, erased all evidence, altered all accounts, and rewrote the dimensional catastrophe into a legend of divine protection saving Rome from ruin. Roman senators for generations never knew the truth. No one understood that Rome's eastward expansion ended not by Parthian strength, but because on that day the shadow of the future touched ancient dust, and in a single moment altered the destiny of the entire Western world.